So I was thinking, folks, I'm a refugee, you're a refugee, we're all refugees. I don't mean to belittle refugees, but I mean, that's kind of what South Africa's government's been doing. Remember, we've heard since the beginning of this year that the white farmer Afrikaners, which of course are South African racial minorities, including coloreds, whites, English speakers, and Afrikaners, all are coming over the refugee program, but they just ignore that. So does CNN. But anyway, so we've heard that they're not real refugees because they didn't come from living in tents, they aren't fleeing a war zone, and they weren't registered with the UN, all of which is poppycock, and I've told you that all year. That's pure poppycock. Well, we also heard the foreign minister claim that they don't qualify as refugees because they don't meet the standards. But Ronald Lamola needs to actually read the standards, because the standards say that someone with a genuine fear of persecution over race, religion, ethnicity, belonging to a certain political group, qualifies as a refugee. Well, now that's all been turned on its head. So we have Palestinians showing up in South Africa who aren't living in tents, they aren't fleeing a war zone, and they aren't registered with the UN. So they don't meet those three conditions. So according to Ronnie Lamola and the South African government, they're not refugees. But they call them refugees. So how can they be refugees if they're not refugees? So the bottom line here, folks, is, listen to this. We're all refugees. Why? Because apparently you can just make up the definition. Ronald Lamola is in a CNN documentary where he lies about what a refugee is. He does. He does. He says that these folks, the South Africans, do not meet the standard, but they have a genuine fear of persecution based on race. That is the standard. That is also the law in the United States. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980 states that. And that is the law that is being used to bring South Africans over. Now, I'm not in favor of South Africans coming over. I'm also not opposed to it. I'm frankly agnostic about it. But the bottom line here is that South Africa's government is distorting reality and lying to the world over and over again. Why? Ask yourself why. They're so obsessed with this. Now the media and South African politicians are talking about Palestinian refugees, but they weren't registered with the UN. They were living in Palestine, or Gaza, so to speak, to be correct. And they paid to leave that area because it sucks. And they went through an Israeli airbase to fly to Kenya to get to South Africa. And because they arrived there without papers, without registering with the UN, and without fleeing a war zone, because the war's over, of course the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement ended the war, but they were being called refugees. So anybody can be a refugee. Anybody. Because Ronnie Lamola just makes it up as he goes. You want to be a refugee? Just tell them you're a refugee. Because anybody's a refugee, according to Ronnie Lamola, except South Africans.